Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hey everyone, it's Paula Edgar here, the host of Branding Room Only, a podcast where I'm talking to you about industry leaders and their influencers and how they've learned to build their personal brands through their experiences, skills, and all kinds of other things. And so I'm excited to be talking to Damien Atkins, who I can call a friend. And also, Damien is the Chief Legal Officer at Aura, a mission-driven technology company dedicated to creating a safer internet for everyone. And he's the host of the Purposeful Leader video series. Damien, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Paula. In addition to all those things I do in my day job, I'm very passionate about technology, transformation, and I'm still working on my tennis game. It's just not working out for me. I'm in a slump. So any tips you have at the end of this, or any viewers want to send me a note, I'm all ears.
I have zero tennis tips for you other than watch Serena. Okay. So you gave a little amplification just now of the intro. Would you consider that to be your full elevator pitch, or would you like to give me your elevator pitch at this time?
That is the elevator pitch. Well, let me back up. Everyone should have an elevator pitch, but you should have multiple pitches based on the right context and situation, right? So if I'm doing an interview with a CEO of a Fortune 500 interview corporation, different elevator pitch. Absolutely different. I would say transformation. I love building teams. I love collaboration. But if it's an elevator pitch where I'm pitching my show, then it's like I'm very curious about what drives human performance, what drives excellence, what makes good leaders versus bad leaders. Are leaders born? Are they made? Those kinds of things. So you have to have elevator pitches based on the context and what your goal is.
I love that because so often, and I think in multiple industries, people will think of this elevator pitch is literally, you're going up in an elevator. How are you going to talk about yourself? But context is super important, and particularly when you're thinking about the concept of personal branding, because your brand navigates differently amongst different people depending on what your purpose is. So to that end, how would you define personal brand?
Yeah, personal brand is a set of, I'd say, attributes that people attach to a particular individual or a product or a thing. But these are intangible attributes that people associate with you as a person that is developed over time. I mean, I think the good analogy would be, a product like my phone here, right? It's an iPhone. And yes, it's functionally, I can make calls with it, I can surf the internet. Those are the kind of functional attributes of it. But the intangible attributes of the iPhone, they're very different than, call it a phone that we get from, what's the Google phone? What do we call it?
I hope you're not going to shade Androids right now, because
I'm not going to shade Androids, but I'm just saying it's different than, hey, I had an iPhone versus someone with a Nokia phone, flip phone.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
So they both kind of do the same. We'll do this effectively the same thing, but there's certain sets of intangible attributes attached to one or the other. And when you talk about personal branding, you are creating a set of intangible attributes that people, your consumers or your friends or whoever else, are going to attach to you, and that takes time to build and whatnot. But that's effectively what it is.
I love that description of it. And I ask all of my guests this question because while I have my own concept that I talk about branding pretty much every single day, it's important to hear how other people think about it, because it impacts what our brands are and what their brands are and our perception of each other based on it. And I like to have that alignment. And I was thinking to myself, like, how long have I known Damien and how have our brands shifted during that time? And it was an interesting endeavor that I thought of, because I was like, I think I met Damien through Dennis Hopkins, which is probably then through PALS, which may have been before, right? Which PALS is a nonprofit, which I'll put a link in when we have in the show notes, but probably then, meaning you were at Chadbourne still, or maybe you were just at AOL.
I think I was at AOL when Dennis was trying to get me in PALS, and it was definitely AOL.
Yeah, so it's been a long time, but anyway, we'll get into some of those shifts. How would you describe yourself in 3 words or phrases?
Curious, and energetic.
Curious, and energetic. Okay, I'm gonna allow you a lawyer go, but by not doing that second one, I'm like, okay, curious, and those work well for tennis.
For tennis, I give you different adjectives: terrible, inconsistent, and angry. But But yeah, I think honestly, I'm a very curious person, for better for
Mhm.
worse. And I try to
Mhm.
be energetic. I try to be an energy giver at any given
Mhm.
time, no matter what. So I think if you're going to give me three words, I'm going to give you two. And I think those are the two that capture the most.
I love it. And I love that you put the caveat of being an energy giver because um, I just love when people qualify their brands, not in just who they are, but what they do and how they give and interact. And I think that's important because, you mentioned that brands are sort of the intangibles. And one of the intangibles are sort of the magic that everybody brings. And I would agree with you that you're an energy giver and that you walk into a room or come into a Zoom space and it's lit up. So that I think that's true. I think
Yeah,
that is true.
I just, that's, kind of, if my dad were here, you've
Mhm.
been like this since you were like, 6 months old. But yeah, that's just, that is something that, is innate. And that when as we get into branding,
Yeah.
people can pick out a phony, right? Your brand has to be, it has to have some integrity to it. It has to be authentic, right? And that is me.
Integrity and authenticity. Ah, I love the word authenticity so much, even though it's overused and underexplained, I think.
Absolutely right.
Um,
Absolutely.
so okay, what's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote comes from John Wooden, former basketball coach at UCLA, is, don't mistake activity for progress.
Ooh, ooh, I like that. Speaking of authenticity, and
It's
that's good.
folks I've worked with, they hear me say it all the time. I'm a firm believer in it. And it's so true. Like oftentimes you see people, I'm just so busy, but what have you gotten done? Like
Mm,
what's been what there's a lot of it's like in physics, right? If there's no displacement, there's been no work and there's been nothing's happened, right? So you can have as much effort put into something, but if the object that you're moving against doesn't move, then it's just a wasted energy. So like, don't mistake activity for achievement. Achievement is based on the amount of work that's based on displacement.
Now that was an interesting analogy. So tell me, because I don't think that the regular layperson would just bring that as an analogy. What did you study in undergrad?
I was a history major. It's interesting. I'm terrible at math. I'm not a math person, but yeah, I've always found, particularly Newtonian physics to be fascinating, particularly the older I get. So I kind of fell in love with it again, kind of after 40. But no, I was a history major. I had like a minor in statistics and like poli sci and Asian and Japanese history. But the older I've gotten, the more interesting I found that the more I found that the laws of physics, particularly Newtonian physics, basically govern the world and they apply in every situation. For each action is an equal and opposite reaction. Yeah.
It's
If there's no
fascinating.
displacement, there's no work. I mean, we could go, there could be a whole nother podcast on this.
That is fascinating. And totally, I don't think that I'm surprised often, but I am often I'm excited when I'm surprised. And that just surprised me. So I'm like, Newtonian. I did not think if I in my game card for today's podcast, I did not have Newtonian physics.
Curious. That's the downside of being a curious person. I'll go down rabbit holes. I have a set of books near me that has like anyway, there's a podcast you should check out called Farnham Street, but there's a bunch of books that are published that go through the kind of elemental laws of physics and chemistry and everything else, but particularly ones of physics, and it has real world examples. So like, organizational culture, second law of thermodynamics, right? It's all of these things. If you study physics and then apply it to the real world, you see that it's pretty much, it matches up one for one.
What's the podcast called again?
It's Farnham Street. I'll send it to you
Okay.
afterwards.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, now let's pivot to one of my favorite things that I study, which is music. So I ask every guest what their hype song is. And just for a little context, your hype song is what you would play in either two different areas. One is if you got to go into a room and impress folks, like what's playing in your head. Or if you're having a bad day, you want to pick yourself up, what are you going to play? So it could be the
Wow.
same or different ones.
It depends on the situation. Before kind of a big board presentation,
Mhm.
yeah, I tend to listen to, and I don't know who actually created this song, Footprints, either Miles Davis or Wayne Shorter. Like
Hey.
that is, that and All Blue, that's my song. I want it because I'm an energetic person. I'm hyped up.
Mhm.
I need to like bring it down. I'm not the person who's gonna, I don't need a cup of coffee before the bread. Not gonna work from that. That's not a bad outcome. So something low key where I have to be very, speak slowly, very
Mhm.
professionally. Now, if it's a presentation like, and I did it Tech GC in the fall when, it's like 300 people in a room and
Mhm.
they got to, they have a podium up there. Then it's a different, is this a PG?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's mine. It's a PGE. Go ahead.
Yeah. It could go pretty deep, for
Yeah.
like lately,
Yeah.
before that one, it was Black Rob.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Whoa.
RIP, but I was listening to Black Rob, right? But it
Wow.
kind of depends. Anything, whatever hype song that I'm listening to at the moment, I will put
Mhm.
that on.
I like it. I
Yeah.
like it. And just for context and your information, because I want to share everything with everybody. Prince, Baby, I'm a Star. It's always mine. That's
Yeah.
my consistent, no matter what. But I do have different ones for different things as well. Like if I'm having a bad day, it's probably a gospel song, then followed by Prince.
Right, 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 right. Yeah,
Okay, nice.
yeah, you got to have your go-to library, right? But for hype song, it's just whatever I'm feeling at the moment.
I like it. Okay. So tell me, because as I mentioned, when I was thinking about how long we've known each other, you've had several career pivots and shifts. And as I was thinking about this, you've been at really big brands in terms of organizations, and you've been at some unknown startup ones as well. Tell me about how you have sort of built your personal brand throughout those things, and maybe kind of talk about the different shifts that you've had. And what's been the mainstay? What's endured during that?
Yeah, I'll answer the last question first. I
Sure.
think the mainstay for me has been an obsession with the impact on technology and technological advancement on business.
Mhm.
And I kind of got the kind of technology bug or the internet bug way back in 2000. I was at my law firm for about 15 months, and I got an opportunity to join a startup, which at the time was groundbreaking. Would have allowed you to pay your parking tickets on the internet. You could have gone to your computer and paid your New York City parking ticket on the internet. And we raised a lot of money, but so that I was like, okay, and I got the bug, and the AOL opportunity happened 4 or 5 years later, and that's, was there for 10 years.
Mhm.
Panasonic, it's a big tech company, but it's really a manufacturing company, being, I would say the force of technological change, or forcing it to change its culture and its business practices and its leadership. Um, and then, Hershey, the same thing. The food space is undergoing a tremendous amount of change, particularly internally, how you use AI, how you use technology to reduce costs, how you use technology to find the right customer segment when you're channel blind. I'm
Mm.
sorry, I'm using jargon
I
here,
know. I
but
was like, what's channel blind? What's
yeah.
that?
So when you're a lot of large manufacturers,
Mhm.
what they'll do is they'll make the phone, but
Mhm.
then put it on a truck to then go to some distribution center or warehouse.
Mhm.
And then from that warehouse, it goes to the retail store.
Mhm.
The person who actually has the most data about who's buying this phone, what time of the day, how much it costs, what features, typically is not the person who made it.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
usually a lot of that data is at the retail side. So, but with technology and sharing whatnot, you can kind of reduce that amount of channel blindness, and the market for data has changed. But anyway, just looking at the impact of technology on business and how it's impacted business practices, strategy, organizational culture.
Mhm.
Uh, and then, lastly, I'm a curious person. So, I was in a tech space, hardcore tech space for 10 years. And it's interesting. I was interviewing for the job at Panasonic, and I remember the CEO saying, have you ever worked at a company where you actually made stuff? And, it just kind of hit me. I was like, no, you're right. And, it's a good thing about being a lawyer. You can be industry agnostic in many ways. So, I'm curious, how are you a global manufacturer with 300 employees around the world? And how do you get the same widget every time, multiple times?
It's interesting because, I think that you and I may have had this conversation years ago where you talked about that industry agnostic piece of this,
Mhm.
but you can't be culture agnostic, right? And I think that one of the interesting pieces about you and how you've been able to shift, and when I think about your brand, is that you've been in really interesting cultures in terms of the people, what may it be from other countries or different segments of this country, or different types of people in terms of entrepreneurship. Talk about that navigation, and how
Yeah,
you.
yeah, that's a good question. For me, it kind of comes natural for me. I mean, I grew up, I'm originally from Oakland, California, but my father was in the Foreign Service. So we moved every 2 years. So every 2 years, we're in a different country, a different group of people, different language, just different food. I mean, kind of different everything. So I learned to not only kind of get used to it, but also thrive on it. And thrown into a different situation and kind of just figuring out like, okay, how do things work here? What's right? What's wrong? What's left? What's right? What's up? What's down? And I went to high school in DC public schools, right? So then another radical shift, right? I was coming from Panama and wearing corduroys and OPs and DCPS in the 80s, culture shock, right? But I love it because learning how there's different ways to be human and different ways to folks organize themselves. So to go from a very fast paced and well, it was not fast paced when I joined, but it did become that very fast paced, very agile, smaller tech company with a big brand to a 100-year-old Japanese manufacturer with a not just a Japanese business culture, but one focused on Osaka, which to me was like the ultimate challenge because the business culture there is 180 degrees different than the US. Then you got a Hershey, which is a typical American brand, but in many ways more similar probably to Panasonic than AOL. So it's just I love kind of looking how people organize themselves and understanding the culture, what works and what doesn't.
So what you just said, I'm thinking, okay, agility, flexibility, being able to pivot, all those things kind of come out of that. And it really makes sense when you explain, how you grew up and sort of being in that space, and curiosity also makes a lot of sense too. But I got a little nervous when I thought about your experience. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd be so scared if it was me in each thing you'd have to do. So what has been your process in sort of, that first 90 days and learning the who and the what about wherever you're in, and even if you're industry agnostic, how do you learn about the space that you're in that time when you start something new?
Yeah, it starts with being curious and then being a good listener. And it's funny, it's something Des Hopkins told me a long time ago. You have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Use them appropriately, and it's exactly right. And something that it's amazing things you pick up on just asking questions and listening, and just asking more questions. But for the first 90 days, I just watch and listen and observe. Eventually, you will find 1 or 2 people will offer themselves or solely become a guide for you. Typically, it's someone either in the department or outside of the department, or you click with someone. But I'd always look for guides. For example, with Panasonic, they institutionally give you a guide just because they know the culture is so different. And I clicked, but you find other guides. Like I found another person, actually an Indian guy, but had worked at Japanese companies for 10, 15 years. Was new to Panasonic, but he knew how everything worked. And he and I would just, we'd connect after work for drinks, or, he would join me for a meeting. It was like, well, Damien, look, this is what's really going on. This is his title. He's there to gather information. Like you got to find your guides and you build relationships with those guides. And then, you make a lot of mistakes. I had one time, I remember I got to Panasonic, there was someone who I didn't quite know what he did. No one really knew what this person did. And I was like, so you've been here 7 years and no one could even tell me what you do. So I was like, you could go. Well, lo and behold, like a week later, I got an email, it was in kanji characters. So I didn't really know the person's name, but it was like, Damien-san, we're coming to New York. We need to talk. Cool. Right. I get some visitors from Japan. I'm kicking it. I'm killing it. 12 people got off the plane and I had 12 people in my office. Damien-san, so-and-so was our window person for this. And, you fired him and we were paying his salary. And so sometimes, and, I learned a lot, right? So, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, hopefully none fatal, but that's also an important part of the process.
You had a whole jury get off the plane.
I had 12 guys come off the plane, come talk to me, have dinner. I had presentations about what they did. It was a whole day.
How far from when the firing happened to when they came was it
1 week?
Yeah. All righty. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It was I really hope, Damien, son, that we can collaborate more effectively in the future.
I mean, at least there was some grace given, right? To
No, family polite, but message received.
uh-huh. Well, I love and what you were talking about and sort of finding the people and Mr. Rogers used to always say, find the helpers. And that's a perfect example. And when I think about how you can navigate your brand, it's also with people, right? It's with who your squad is. And,
Right.
we've mentioned Dennis several times because he's somebody who both of us have in common. When you think about the folks who have been mainstays throughout your career, is there anybody, it could be Dennis or other people, that you want to shout out that have been sort of your mainstays in terms of helping navigate your relationships and your experiences? And I know we have somebody else in common who I'm thinking of who that might be in that space as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, I would generally say the person I've gotten the best advice from starting out through mid-career, later career, higher level positions, whatever, it's actually been my dad.
I love it.
He is was a career diplomat for 30 years and working in the State Department is known for being the snake pit of all snake pits. But as a Black Foreign Service officer in the 70s, through the 80s and 90s, his advice, again, different context, not a commercial context, but his advice and his analysis on personalities and, I'm like, Dad, you should have you got, you have like a Machiavelli prince in you, like you need something. So I would say he has probably been, he and my uncle as well, actually, my uncle, his younger brother, I'm not gonna say little brother. But I would say those two, absolutely. I have never made a move without talking to both of them. So, and my uncle was on Wall Street for 30 plus years. So those two, that's from a family. Outside of that, Dennis has been, from the moment he came to my law firm and he tried to take the title of that guy at the firm, he's always someone who's been in my corner.
I love it. So when you think about your dad and your uncle, and then I know you also have children, is there any advice that you find yourself saying that you have received from those folks that you say to your kids now?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, my son is like so sick of it. He has I do it like almost like nursery rhymes. Whatever you do, big or small, do it well, don't do it at all. Right.
It's like hip hop and nursery rhymes.
Right. Please, you just mistook activity for achievement yet again. Wow. But Dad, I spent so much time doing that. I still see, what is, I'll come up with some other things that my dad and my uncle have said, but that, especially whatever you do it well, don't do it all. I mean, that's.
Yeah. My mother used to always say, the minimum is not something that we even know about. We don't do the minimum.
Oh, the standard is the standard. That's another one.
I love it.
The standard is the standard. Really? Do I care? And I think that one has been probably very, very, probably the most hopeful because, you need anchors to go to as, particularly someone who's curious like me. I tend to go off and, who knows, but it's an anchor, right? The standard is the standard. And what that means is, no matter what you do, whatever it is, it has your name on it. It's going to stay with that for a long time. So you've got to put your best on no matter what it is. And, my first assignment, I remember day, well, it's a terrible assignment. When I see the guy who gave it to me, I still give him crap about it. 20 years later was, it was like managing the, anyway, it was just a terrible assignment. But I remember I was complaining with things like, standard is standard. You do a bad job of it, you're not going to see anything better.
Right.
That's all you're going to do.
I'm not going to trust you to do anything better if you can't get this done.
Yeah, that's all you're going to be doing, right? So.
Yeah. When I talk to organizations about branding, I always say that, perfection is not the standard, right? But excellence is, and it's always what you should be driving towards. And so that resonates really true for me when I think about branding and our conversation, that you should be looking at excellence and that your name is attached to anything that you do and you're connected to. So
yeah,
love it.
You put your name on it, that speaks for you long after you're gone.
100%. So you are doing this Purposeful Leader video series, And so you've spoken to some leaders who I was like, oh, I got to go back and watch some of these. What have you learned from the leaders about leadership and branding that you can share with our audience?
Wow, I've learned a lot. Those are probably some of the most valuable conversations I've had, at least in my professional life. I think the first one is, the first person you have to lead is yourself, and you have to do that in a very authentic manner. People spot a phony in a heartbeat. And particularly, just because you have a team of people working for you or on your team, so to speak, doesn't mean they're not less intelligent, doesn't mean they have a lower EQ than you. They're in a different role, right? So if you are not true to yourself and authentic, people will be on that. So you have to find, as I say, the Paul Edgar way to be the leader, right? There's no person could be better than Paul Edgar way to be the leader, right? Right. No, but it's true, right? So one of my mistakes, and it's interesting talking to leaders who've done this, is, I'm going to look at so-and-so, I'm going to look at so-and-so, I'm going to be just like that person. And I was reading books, I was reading, basketball coaches, I was reading, Phil Jackson's book. I mean, just all of this stuff, I was all into it. And I was like, none of this is working. And I realized that you do have to read widely, talk to people, emulate people, but at the end of the day, you have to make it your own. And it has to be an authentic expression of yourself. And for me, and I found that other leaders have done the same thing, is through trial and error. And some people just realize, look, I'm not the kind of leader. Like, I don't want to be out in front. I want to be I'm more of a Stalin-esque type person where you just don't see me, right? And that works with people. But sometimes, but you have to figure out what is the most effective for you. And I think the second thing has been the best leaders, not just the best lawyers, but the best leaders are driven beyond just career achievement and beyond just making money. They're driven by a purpose, and it's this word, like you said, it gets abused and it's ill-defined, but they have a reason for wanting to take on the responsibility to help others grow. And they're motivated by that more than anything else. And like I talked earlier about having anchors, that is their ultimate anchor when they're trying to make a decision. And there's a lot of tough calls, particularly people decisions. That is the most important thing that animates the best folks. And each person I've talked to, they've been on a very, different journey in terms of finding their purpose, but over time they realize that's the whole point, right? Some it's, getting the next generation of leaders. Some are motivated by, everyone here to be the best lawyer they possibly can be, or whatever that is, but you got to be authentic and then have that purpose behind it.
I mean, real legacy cannot just sit with you, right? It's about your impact. So
absolutely right. Absolutely right. And, there's plenty of bad leaders out there who, they just want the title and the money, and, and it shows, right? They don't have a leadership tree. They don't have people following them wherever they go. I mean, it shows, it shows, right? So those are probably the two most important things. And I think lastly, a third is, leadership is very context specific as well. Something I've learned both the hard way and the good way is that, let me back up. So this morning I was at the gym and I ran into Rick Pitino at my gym. He's in there, he's there doing bench pressing, right? And I was like, all right, I'm not gonna let this opportunity go by because
right.
Serious energy. But I was like, yo, coach, congrats on the St. John's job, whatever. And I was just like, look, so tell me, how was it? How have you changed, your thoughts about leadership and building teams? Because you were just at Iona, and then you were at Kentucky, then you were at Louisville, and like he was like, look, Damien, it's like it's all about the right context that you're in and who's there and what drives them. He's like, I know I like helping young men succeed and grow in life, and I do that through being a coach. But when I started off at Iona, it's very different than being in Providence and very different than Louisville. Right. So you have to adapt, you have to have fundamental principles and a philosophy about you, but you have to be flexible enough to understand the context and situation that you're in. Phil Jackson's a great coach. Didn't work at the Knicks.
No.
Didn't work. Didn't work. Didn't mean he's not a bad coach.
Yeah.
Just didn't work. Right. So, and Yeah, he left that with me today.
Right. I'm like, it's fresh and new off the presses. Nobody
Yeah,
else heard this yet.
yeah. I saw him. I was like, "There's no way. I can't leave the gym and then not talk to him." So.
I mean, that resonates deeply because I went to UMass Amherst. And so in the morning, the basketball team would be like at breakfast. And I was like, Coach,
Yeah,
oh my God.
yeah, right.
I never asked any profound question. I was just like, oh my God, it's going to good.
Yeah.
I was there. Just, anyway.
I'm old. I just
Yeah.
if you don't shoot your shot, you're gonna miss them all.
100%. And I love that you said that. And we're absolutely going to pull that out because it pains me how many people don't consider the fact, and this is a brand piece too, that you are not left any worse off if you don't shoot that shot than where you were before it. And I just want everybody to understand that we're losing out on opportunity by not making those asks. And so I'm glad you said it because we are aligned in that 100%.
All the time.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's gotten love.
The energy's coming, right? That you
exactly.
feel
You got to shoot your shot. Okay. So you started talking about some mistakes that you have made when you had the whole jury get off the plane. But when you think about either people who you've worked with or folks who are your colleagues or just throughout your career, what mistakes sort of stand out when you think about people and their brand that you want to share?
Yeah, I found, a couple mistakes I've seen is when people overextend themselves. Like brands are made when, again, it's a set of intangible attributes people associate with a particular person. And a couple things. It takes, when people rush to kind of, oh, I want to be branded as the corporate governance person. I want to be branded as the privacy person, right? In this legal audience. And they don't necessarily realize that that's building a brand is not something that happens overnight. And number one. Number two, if you have a great branding strategy where I'm posting on LinkedIn, I got my little videos, but the product is terrible. So you got to, advice to folks is the product's got to be tight. The product has to, and particularly as a lawyer, it has to fulfill whatever, it has to fulfill either a deep human need or has to have some functional purpose, but it has to fulfill that need consistently over time. And then the second thing is, one essay or one book or one podcast, not going to create your brand. And, there's a lot of pitfalls out there, but you have to consistently deliver what your product says it's going to deliver all the time. And, I find that people want to rush it, hey, I'm going to be on this panel and I'm going to talk on this. And did you see that article about the new SEC's regulations? No one cares. But I've seen people doing an excellent job as kind of, building relationships in the space that they want to be known for, consistently providing actionable insight on these things. And, 4 or 5 years later, you then will have a nice, there'll be a set of intangible attributes that people will say, hey, this person's really smart about this, or this person is very knowledgeable about that. Go to so-and-so for that. Right. And that's because people use brands and branding to make choices, right? We're living in a world where there's thousands of choices. We're bombarded with choice. Yeah. But you use brands as a way to differentiate A from B to some C to D. And they do the same thing with, lawyers and everything else. So be patient. Products got to be tight and be consistent.
I'm like sitting here at like the Church of Damien, like, yes, preach, amen. All of that because inconsistency when it comes to your brand or deviation, and not innovation, but deviation can totally derail what you have tried to build. And I preach it all the time because I know the power of it. I know that when people can rely and say like, that person, they're going to deliver this, and this, or in these ways. And it is not a lie. It is the truth, consistency, regardless, even if they're trying to innovate, makes sense. But if you're like, all of a sudden you're a dog lawyer, when you have never seen a pet, you've never done any of these things, it's a brand killer.
Yeah. And the key, the best brands are ones that are differentiated, because at the end of the day, it's a very crowded space. There's thousands of corporate lawyers in New York, right? Yeah. You've got to figure out again, and I say this about being authentic,
Mhm.
what your angle is individually to it, you know, this is the Damien Atkins view of leadership.
Right.
But and I'm not, and it's not branding, but it's true, right? This
Mhm.
is my take, and my take might be a little idiosyncratic, or might be, energetic. I might bring the laws of physics in, whatever that is. But people are going to look, oh, you want, oh, just talk to so and so, and deviating, like to kind of build on what you said. You don't see me talking about tax inversions, and not me, right? That's not, oh, the latest things in GDPR and this kind. I know it,
Right.
but
Let's
you're
talk
not
about
going to
it.
be looking. Yeah, you're not going to be looking at me talking about it.
Yeah.
But I see people do it all the time, where they skip around trying to find their. No, that's fine.
Mhm.
Once you pick a lane,
Yeah. I always say you can skirt it a little bit, but you can't be going outside of the lanes.
and unless you shut it down for 2 years or so, and then you reemerge, and hey, Damien's really into basket weaving. Did you know he did this? So,
Next up, everybody,
right.
Damien Atkins, basket weaver.
Well,
Hilarious.
like Jamie Foxx, right? He was a comedian.
Mhm.
Started off, he was on Living Color. He was like, what was the character's name?
Wanda.
Well, he was Wanda. He was one, and with he's just a funny guy. I remember I met him like a long time ago. He was like a young guy. He was hilarious, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
next thing you know, oh, he's singing. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, now he's okay.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
brand is still, and so yeah, he went to adjacencies, but over time,
Yeah. Yes.
that wasn't a year. It was a 10-year plus effort, where he went from Wanda to playing Ray Charles to singing, Blame It. Yes. But
You gotta put that in the soundtrack that we're building for this.
but it's true, right? Like, he
It
was very
is.
thought. If you watch, and this is the best analogy I think for lawyers, is look at someone like a Jamie Foxx.
Mhm.
Look at entertainers who've created brands about themselves, and how they've, people think, oh, he's just a funny guy. Well, no. Very thoughtful about what he does, how he does it, where he does it, with whom he does it,
100%.
right? Like his brand is energy.
Yep.
He's funny,
Mhm.
talented, right?
Yep.
But always, but you don't see him as like the rugged guy, or no.
Right.
But he's built that over time, and it's the same. I think lawyers would do a good job would do well by looking at, for someone like a Jamie Foxx, or someone like that, who's built thoughtfully and built that brand.
It's all strategy, because you can be multi-skilled and be excellent in multiple things, but you have to understand how and when to pivot it, and to use it, and to be consistent. And I think that Jamie Foxx is a perfect example. All right, so as we're rounding our conversation out, there's a couple things that I need to know from you. Number one, we've kind of talked about, the work stuff, but I want to know about the fun stuff. Like, what is the fun part about your brand? What do you do for fun?
Oh, I love my show. I love having the video cast and talking and learning from interesting people. It has enabled me to learn and explore and discover things about myself, that I never would have known. I think that, loving, and I love a challenge, but I love kind of transformation. I love change, and been able to be in situations where I felt like I could have a meaningful impact. And that's fun, right? So, coming to a situation, saying A, and then 3 years later, like, oh, whoa, it's totally different here, right? People have fun, having a good time. That to me is, I do that. I do it without getting paid. That's the fun stuff. But at the end of
But
the
pay
day,
him though, but pay him.
but it's the people, right? It's
Yeah.
I'm a people person. It's the
Mhm.
energy, it's the energy I get from folks. Love it, absolutely love it.
I love
And
that.
then, I enjoy sometimes, learning from the mistakes, right? Because, it might be painful in the moment, but, you go back and like, man, no, really? What that did I really? But
There-
it's the people. It's working with the people, right? And helping people, and, growing personally.
I love that. As a fellow people person, I think that is awesome.
Yeah.
So in my podcast, I ask all of my guests these two questions. So question number one is, stand by your brand. What is the authentic, to that point, aspect of your personal/professional brand that you will never compromise on?
Yeah, I will never, I will never not be a curious and energetic person. I am someone, and this is probably, probably not to my benefit, but I'm not one to, yeah, let me back up. in addition to being curious and energetic, I'm somewhat of a nonconformist.
Mm,
I was, even 10 years ago, I'd be the guy wearing the red pants in the meeting.
yes, fashion.
Right. Or, I'm a hat person. I like my fedoras.
Okay.
And sometimes it's, if you want to build a brand, it's good. The only way to really build a brand is to be different or better. And I focus on both. And, sometimes I might right. So but sometimes being different, it attracts, oftentimes attracts negative energy. So, just because you're shining, it always brings out people who want to block the shine, steal your shine. And, I've, for a long time, I would be like, oh, no, whatever. And then think about it and get angry and get upset. Why? You're stealing my stuff. That was like, you're quoting in the paper. I told you, like, what? Like in hip hop in the 80s, the biters.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So,
right in my style.
Yeah, that is, but that is me, right? I'm authentic, and I realize that if the moment I start compromising on that, the energy level goes down, curiosity goes down, then I go from energetic Damien to
disengaged.
I just,
yeah,
not a good spot. So, I've learned the hard way many times that you're better off being, be a little different, but better off being me and authentic as opposed to. And there are some people that works that works for folks, right? This is not me.
I mean, I think that's great. And I love that fashion came into this because, I love an outfit. So you hit me where I love, okay. And this might be along the same lines, but the podcast is called Branding Room Only. So what is something about you, your unique special gift, attribute, etc., that would pack a room of people to stand up and see you do, show, or be?
Yeah, I think it's one, it's the energy. Because I'd always like to be either the last person or the first person to present it. Right. People don't like that, but those are the people, if you want to be remembered, be first or last. Right. So, and I like to bring the energy because everyone's either like nervous or whatever else, or I'm just tired. So that's number 2, but it's bringing the energy. 2, I like to think, and this is just my own personal opinion, is that I like to take being a curious person, I can take concepts and ideas from a lot of different fields and apply them in ways that you might not think are just might be surprising. Like I said, most things in life can be explained by the laws of physics, right? So, when you have 2 frequencies and you put them together, when you have harmonious frequencies, it expands, it's louder, it's better. Anyway, there's just a lot of different things. So I like to read widely, take concepts from people who are doing things that are not lawyers. I think lawyers, particularly law firm lawyers, could talk to salespeople. Spend time. You want to learn how to go talk to salespeople. Lawyers don't do it. I want to talk to really good lawyers. This is what people do. You want to learn how to swim? You're going to go talk to a carpenter? No, you go talk to someone who swims. But I like to bring ideas and notions from a lot of different fields and apply them in ways that are either entertaining or novel or constant. So you combine that plus the energy. I think that, at least for me, is what I think I offer folks, particularly if I'm first or last. The middle.
Well, that is awesome. And I am so excited that we had a chance to bring our harmonious frequencies together for this podcast. See, I'm out here learning. And Damien, I want to thank you for being a guest on Branding Room Only. And everybody, I'm so happy that I had a chance to do this. And I'm excited to hear what you think about today's conversation. And tell a friend to stand by their brand. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Branding Room Only podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to hit subscribe to get future episodes.